been a while since you've seen me on camera, and I kind of rushed today, so no judgment. I'm going to get right into tonight, but first I want to let you all know that tonight we're going to be talking about a very sensitive subject, and it is abuse in an intimate relationship, violence in an intimate relationship. We know this month is, I'm going to say it once. Unfortunately, YouTube has rules about saying the words domestic violence, but I'm going to say it twice. This is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, so I'm going to give listeners a trigger warning. It is posted in the chat. This is an open and uncensored discussion about living through and escaping a violent, intimate relationship. Please be advised, this content may not be suitable for all viewers. And I will keep that pinned at the top of the chat, but I may find myself repeating it just in case people are joining in. So normally I would do an introduction for my guests, but tonight I'm just going to add her into the conversation right away because I want her to be on screen when I do it, so that it's just so it plays out right. And again, thank you to everyone that's here. I see you all. I see a lot of familiar faces. And so now I'm going to add Jacqueline to the stream.
Hello.
You look beautiful.
Well, thank you. Didn't do much.
But you don't have to. Jacqueline is a survivor of an abusive relationship with a law enforcement officer. So these are some of the things I wanted to say in front of Jacqueline because we are on the same page. When I mentioned that she was in a marriage with a law enforcement officer, I want you all to know that we still support the police and law enforcement in general. It's just one of those, it's one of those situations where there's a bad one in every bunch. So this is by no means an attack on people that put their life on the lines every day. And so we'll get that out of the way. The second part is that when I talked to Jacqueline about this, I actually didn't want to ask her. I was looking for somebody that I knew had a good support system around them and had received counseling, continued support, because this can be obviously, it can trigger a lot of things in people. She's never spoken publicly about this. She's beginning to, and I'm very proud of her. So this is her debut, but she has many more. She has a long future ahead, and I think she's going to change a lot of lives. And I truly believe that. I want to put it on the table that Jacqueline and I do have a personal relationship. We met years ago. We worked together for, you would say, a shortish period of time, probably. And it was probably in the midst of some of what she's going to tell you tonight. But we kept in touch. We don't have slumber parties and things like that. We're the kind of friends that can pick up the phone, like 6 months has gone by and we can pick up the phone and be there for each other, I think is a fair thing to say.
Yes, I agree.
And it always just kind of goes back. She has a wonderful sense of humor. She's incredibly intelligent. The entire package. And I've told her tonight when she speaks that if at any time she feels uncomfortable, that this is about her and there's something she doesn't want to answer, she needs to go right away, we're all here to support her. And I know that I can count on you guys to do that. If you have questions, she has said that she will answer them. And so we kind of talked about how we were going to navigate this subject. So I believe the decision we came to was that we would start at the night that triggered her exit from her marriage. So do you want to start from there? Do you feel good? Like you feel
Sure.
like you're ready to go? Okay.
Sure.
All right.
I'll just jump right in. The night that I finally decided to leave was the very first night that it was physical abuse. Previously, it was emotional, mental, but it was the very first time that it became physical, which was May of 2018. So it's that roughly 3.5 years ago. And that night, my daughter was struggling with her therapy in her therapy through autism. And so she had meltdowns often, and she was almost 3 years old. And that was one of the nights that my ex and I had already discussed, maybe we should try a trial separation. Maybe we should take a break. So we were sleeping on separate sides of the house. And my daughter was just having one of her nights. She had a cold, and colds were never good for her because she felt out of control. So it was just a screaming fit. And his way to handle that was yelling at her or telling her to stop. It was never any type of patience or anything. So it would always make me very nervous. So I shut us in our bedroom and had just kept us trying to get her to take her medicine. And the night just escalated with him growing more and more angry with the situation and attempting to come into the room. And it became very verbal to where at a point my daughter had came up to me and said, Daddy, when you stepped outside, because I usually step outside to take breathers with her, she said Daddy had choked her. So I locked us in our room and I texted my mother and had said, I don't know what to do. This is scaring me. He's never done anything that physical with my daughter, but I'm her biggest advocate, always have been for my children. So if they tell me something, I'm to take it as fact until it's no longer proven to be a fact. So I had to take it for what it was and believe her. And his actions that night were already intense. So it wasn't very hard of a stretch for me to believe. So after we had locked ourselves in there for a couple hours, he managed to get in. And as I pushed the conversation, not physically, but out of the room so that she wasn't present, it got physical, and he had attacked me, and he broke my shoulder, my collarbone, and the tendons that held it all down while my daughter was watching. So after a few hours of him refusing any sort of help or treatment of me on the floor with my daughter on top of me, he finally agreed to go step outside and call my mother, who was in town trying to help with the separation, to come and get me, which I was under the impression he had just said, come get her, she's injured. And I didn't know that he had stepped outside to talk to her to kind of control the narrative. And so when she picked me up, we went to the hospital. I told them, just quickly treat me and get me out of here. The wonderful people at the hospital knew that it is mandatory to report any type of DV. So they did state, did this happen by someone? They could obviously tell the type of injury wasn't just I ran into the wall or fell. But I had asked them, I said, I know you have to mandatorily report this, but I'm requesting, my children are still in the home, and I'm requesting you to not report it because he is law enforcement, and I need to get there quickly and get my kids out first before any kind of report or law enforcement gets involved so that they are safe. Right. And so the wonderful doctor agreed. He still notated it, thank goodness. But he agreed not to report it so that I can get home and get my children to safety. And my mother and I went home after a couple hours in the ER. And when we pulled up, my mother stepped out of the car and went to the door and said, you need to leave, to him at the house. For some reason or another, he agreed to go stay at his father's for that day. I don't think he realized the gravity of the injuries or what had occurred. And my mother and I got my children. I had a go bag already packed because of just my intuition. I had stuffed it in the attic, and I grabbed that, and I grabbed the girls, and we whisked away to a hotel locally for 2 weeks, which was the start of a very terrifying journey.
Right. So I'm going to back up because I feel like this is really, really important to share. When Jacqueline is laying on the floor and she's injured, she's asking her husband to call her mom or to call somebody. and he's not going to call 911 because he's a police officer and he doesn't want that at his house. He left her there for hours, and because she has a child with autism, she was trying to remain calm as not to trigger her child and put her child in further danger. In addition, after like a couple of hours, he came back and he said, I don't have your mom's number, and took her cell phone, and walked outside and was gone. So there were probably thoughts going through your head like, did he just leave me on the floor here without a phone?
Mm-hmm. Which he had refused to get me for a few hours, but I couldn't get up and I couldn't yell or show my distress because my daughter was already really freaked out as she witnessed what happened and didn't want to see mommy upset. So I had begged for the phone.
She'd already been a victim herself earlier.
Right.
So, she was terrified. And I know Jacqueline's daughters, and they're just the sweetest little things. I love them. They give me like littlest pet shop people and stuff.
They're very giving.
They're very sweet. Yeah. So you just mentioned that you had your go bag ready to go. Can you tell, if there's somebody in the audience, what a go bag is?
So that's one of the things that I always post in my DV groups and everything. When people say, if you feel like you need to leave, what's one of the steps? And my biggest thing was I was very, very lucky to have that gut intuition 2 weeks before everything, because it was spiraling out of control, but very emotionally and verbally, not yet physically.
Right.
But because he had such control over everything in my life, I didn't even know our bank account numbers. I didn't know any of our tax information. I didn't have the deed to our house. I didn't have my birth certificate, my children's, our passports, anything like that. So in the week or two before, I had carefully removed all of that stuff and made copies of any tax documents of the year before, so that I knew in there would be bank account information and everything. And then all of our birth certificates and our passports other than his. And I had put it in a duffel bag and I hid it in the attic. So, and it is along with a checkbook, some cash. I had taken my driver's license out of my wallet just in case he had taken that to hide or anything. And then I also had a copy of my car key that I had put in a duffel bag. So that was in my attic hidden, and he did not know that that's where it was, just in case I had to grab something like that, which ironically, looking back, I don't even know why I thought that was necessary, because I didn't think I'd ever be in the position that I was in. However, it was very helpful. And if people could just make copies of those kind of things, when it spirals out of control, especially with an abusive person, they will do anything and everything to prevent you from getting away. And it does not matter the collateral damage like the children. So having that, I would have never got access to any of that information, including my children's birth certificates. I never would have seen again. And obviously we weren't planning on leaving the country, but it was something that we all needed. That information.
But let's talk about that. We didn't talk about this before we went on air. I'm not going to say where. There was a time, and it wasn't long before all this happened, that you went on a family vacation out of the country.
Yes.
And I'll tell you guys, I knew something was going on. In fact, I even said to Jacqueline the other day, I apologized to her. I said, I just didn't, it was kind of like nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Like I knew, and she wasn't talking to me, and I didn't feel comfortable. And at one point, like I wasn't her boss, but I kind of was, and I didn't want to be intrusive and ask her things. And even like years later, Jacqueline and I talked about, we were pretty serious about starting a business together. We had done a business plan and a marketing plan and we picked a name and gone out to real estate places and stuff. And I could tell just do you remember that? Do you remember Alan calling? Do you remember him calling when
I do.
When we were out? So scary to think you were out of the country and he had control of all those things.
It was. And we had a very bad car accident out of the country too. Mm-hmm. That caused a lot of problems because.
And that was due to anger too.
It was. Mm-hmm. It was due to anger and control.
Yeah. Basically he spun the car out in front of a bunch of traffic and
we got T-boned. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We were T-boned with my children in the car in a foreign country. So.
The other thing is that you mentioned that this hadn't been physical before. So let's talk about the emotional abuse that led up to this point and the control, because it's very, and I'll just start you guys off because this is where I met Jacqueline. Okay. So we're working together. And we go to lunch one day, like literally, what was it? A mile from our office?
Yes, it was very close. Mm-hmm.
And we're sitting at a table, and I know her husband's a police officer. Maybe I met him because he came up to work or something.
Maybe.
I thought it was like all sweet. Now I realize it wasn't, because he played the part. Mm-hmm. And we're sitting at the table, like eating our little salads. And he's sitting at a table, like, 10 feet away, watching us. And so I said to her, like, because I was uncomfortable, like, do I bring this up or not? I'm like, is that your husband? And she looked over and she's like, yeah, he's, like, what did you say? You like made a joke. Like, he's weird like that sometimes. It's like,
right.
Too. And I was like, okay. But then as time went on, you were staying at a hotel or your mom was in town helping or whatever, but and I'm not diminishing this at all. It wasn't physical abuse at that time. You had one child at that time. It was before you had your second. And would it be fair to say that he set you up to feel like you were being taken care of, but actually what he was doing was taking everything away from you so that you were dependent upon him?
Yes.
So can you talk about a little bit about that and how that happens slowly and how you just don't even notice it until you're like, oh my God.
Right. A lot of this I didn't even realize until even after I had left and began processing and got talking into DV groups and other groups about abuse and doing a lot of research on different clinical personality types that typically become abusers. I didn't even realize that half the things that were occurring to me were abuse. And I always describe it to everybody. I believe I told you earlier how I can explain it to people because they always say, why did you stay? Or why didn't you leave? Or how did you not recognize that? Is just like I don't know if anybody's heard the analogy of a frog in boiling water. If you drop a frog into boiling water, they realize that it's boiling and they jump out. If you put a frog in room temperature water and slowly increase it to boiling, they'll boil to death because they can't recognize the temperature increase until it's too late. So that was pretty much how it was. It was over roughly 11 years of a slow progression of this. I accepted this and then I accept a little bit more and a little bit more. And until it compounded into 10 or 11 years, or even after I left, it didn't feel like abuse at the beginning. We rushed a relationship early on and got pregnant early on. And his response to me telling him I was pregnant was, move in with me, sell your car. I'll give you my car, quit your job. I'll take care of you. You don't need a bank account. You have my debit card, use it when you need it. And you don't need to have your own place. So I didn't have anything that was my own. However, in the moment, it felt to me like someone who was being kind and taking care of me, being a gentleman who wanted to make sure that I didn't have any worries.
It's sad too, because when you met him, you did have your own things.
Yes. I had my entire own life. I had a really good job. I was making great money, but I thought this guy now knows I'm pregnant and was like, great, let me take care of you. And that was like the best thing that you could have told somebody like me in a situation who was pregnant, because would have done it alone. However, I didn't want to. And so I just thought, what a knight in shining armor to do all of that. And for lots of years, it didn't pose a problem because he took care of the bills. He took care of the income, and I didn't have to worry about any of it. So it was a nice relief after being on my own to not have to worry about bills. And especially with a kid, I didn't have to worry. They were all taken care of. He was very, very clinical with the way he handled money. He pinched every single penny, and everything was, paid for, taken care of. We had a really nice life just based on his income alone. And I got to stay home with my daughter, one daughter at the time. And then when my second was born, both of them, which I never would have complained about. However, it was just I never had my own bank account. I didn't have a car in my name. I didn't have finally at the end, thank goodness, I had a house in my name, in both of our names. But when I had to leave, I left without a bank account. I left without a job. I left without a degree. I left without a job history. So I didn't even have 2 pennies to rub together to pay for food for my children because I didn't have enough foresight to set myself up for any type of fallback plan.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
You'll learn.
Well, let's there's something you were just saying that struck me. Let's talk about the no job history and going, because so you worked with me, and you left, and you went and you worked some other places, and then you decided that you wanted to go back and finish your degree, and you were doing really well. What happened at the jobs before you went back to school?
A lot of it was sabotage through his part. However, it would come across as he would pitch it to me as his job is priority. He was the breadwinner. My job didn't mean anything. So if our daughter got sick or she needed to go to the doctor or couldn't go to daycare or school that day, he would always say, like, that's on you. You have to stay home. And so I would have just started a new job. And then he would say, I'm not staying home. My job is the important one. Your job is a throwaway. So you have to stay home with her. And then after, 4 or 5 call-ins of my kid's sick again, I got to stay home or got to take her to the doctor, or she's, just won't go to school today or anything. Or our daycare or our babysitter canceled, I would lose my jobs. And he would say, that's fine. You don't need a job. I've already told you that, you don't need these jobs. He's like, they don't pay much. So it's a joke. And it was always just a slight put down to make sure that I felt like I wasn't good enough and I couldn't make it on my own. And I didn't have anything outside of my home that was my job. Right.
So there were the jobs, and that was sabotaged. And I saw it firsthand.
Right.
It was hard to watch. You were really, really good at your job.
Really, oh, thank you.
It was hard to watch. Then you went back to school. Oh, let's just talk about one thing. Does he have flexibility in his schedule?
Yes.
Yes. So it wasn't about that. It was about punishing you.
Yes. He saved up because he was a saver. He saved up all of his paid time off. He could take, when each child was born, he took 3 to 4 months paid leave with the children because he had it all saved up. He was able to take whatever time he needed off, and his job was able to be flexed around. So and most of the 10 years he worked nights. So he was home during the day.
Right. And sometimes when you had to stay home, he would be home too.
Yes.
It was okay. I just want people to understand what this was like, because she's trying to hold a job and she's getting no support. And it's just because we did have some conversations when you were trying to get other jobs and things like that about how you were going to, do it and how things like that. So your work history is unstable at this point, and you decide you're going to go back to school and get this degree. And what happens with that?
I decided to go to a very stringent 4-year degree program And this was already after I had agreed to complete his degrees at home online the previous years. I got his AA, his bachelor's, and his master's online at home because I saw it as my way to contribute financially, because if he got a degree, he got a raise. And, you know, that was still our money. And I felt like, well, you're working, so I can do the at-home schoolwork. He wasn't that capable of completing schoolwork or degrees. So I said, I'll do that and provide. And that's how I could provide at home. That way I felt like I was, even though being a full-time mother is bringing enough to the table, I didn't think that at the time.
It is. And let me stop you there because I want to work this in here so you guys can understand this. So now she's at home and she's not working, and she was really good at what she did, really good. And he's making her feel like she's less than. And you start having some, I'm not going to out you here, but some like issues with like a lot of us get, like anxiety, things like that, right?
I did.
Because he's putting you down all the time. You're realizing the walls are closing in.
Yes.
The getting taken care of life that you thought you had is becoming more and more like a control situation.
Yes.
And you're sort of waking up and not wanting to.
Right. And I was feeling it was always underhanded comments about putting me down, about what do you do all day? You just sit around all day. So I was already feeling like taking care of the house, taking care of the kids was not good enough. And it was a type of coercive control where I started believing, not because he was telling me, I believed that I wasn't doing enough. Like I'm what a loser. I don't have a job. I don't have any of this. So then I wanted to seek other ways that I could help. So finishing my degree that I had started, oh my gosh, I don't know, 15 years ago, I figured, well, then I'll finish my degree so that when I do get a job, it's not minimum wage. So he can't say, okay, your job is throwaway. I'll go back, get my 4-year, and then I can get a job where I'm making just as much as him, because not to, so that I could leave, but so that I would get the respect that I deserve from him, because I just felt so small.
I completely understand that. So I'm trying to figure out as we go along how to pepper things in so they make sense. So one step we missed here was, in between working like in a traditional setting and going to school, you went back to modeling and you were doing really well. Like
I did that right before I started back to college. I decided he had pushed it actually organically grown. One day he had challenged me and said, you could never just get a job at any of these tactical companies I buy, you know, my tactical gear from, because I think we saw a model on one of the tactical companies or something. And because he said I could never do it, I went immediately to a neighboring city, walked right into the doors and said, I don't have much modeling experience. I paid a friend to take some, you know, good pictures of me outside. Here, I would like to model for you. And I landed a large tactical gun company campaign. So I came home and was like, there you go. And most of my accomplishments when I was with him, which were few and far between, but they were still there, were basically based off of him telling me I couldn't do it, or, you know, laughing it off and saying like, this is nothing you could ever do, because then that would light fire into my butt. And I would say, okay, I can prove you wrong. So that it kind of just, my career developed ironically. And then I became more and more in the modeling industry. And I really loved it. I loved the artistry. I loved the outlet. I was able to express myself creatively, and it wasn't anything that threatened him. So he supported it wholeheartedly. He also really loved the more and more money he put into hair and makeup, because I became much better arm candy in his community too, amongst his peers. So, and it was a bragging opportunity for him amongst his community. So he enjoyed that.
So that's why he didn't sabotage that, was because it benefited him.
And it was making me very good money. So
it was. And she
making him very good money.
You even did some pretty high profile print work for, she did some really beautiful photos and good campaigns and things like that. So it benefited him. So he didn't sabotage you that way.
Right. And he also knew that it wasn't going anywhere because I was only getting older. You know, 27 in modeling years is 75. So he knew that this is going to end. She's not going to take this, and explode and leave me, or so it was something that was going to end. I wasn't going to be able to continue growing up the ranks in it.
So what else was in it for him while you were modeling? What
the money else? The arm candy, the bragging rights. Okay. And he was also capable of then utilizing it as a way to control my intake, my food intake, my spending money, and the way I looked. And he used it as, well, you have a photo shoot coming up, so you need to, not eat so much, or you need to do your hair differently, or you need to be getting better rest and washing your face more. It was always, it was a very easy way for him to control with an excuse, because 9 times out of 10, minus the extreme eating, he was right. Right. Okay. Yeah, I do need to, go get my hair done, or I do need to diet a little bit more. I do have a really high paid shoot coming up that I need to take care of myself for, or go get a spray tan. So it was an open door to nitpick and every little detail of my life.
Right. But you had shared with me that there were times that you were sneaking out of the house in the middle of the night to go get food because he wasn't allowing you to eat before these photo shoots.
Yes. And he would check the debit card statements because it was only his account. And every night, every little charge, what was this? What was this? And I will be honest, the $300 charge for makeup was never questioned, but the $6.95 at McDonald's was a very big problem. And he would say, like, I'm taking your debit card if you keep doing this. You can't just keep eating fast food. And the way he said it, it was never angry, aggressive, yelling, or threatening. It was more just where it was almost like that voice in the back of your head where you're like, oh, okay, I shouldn't be eating McDonald's all the time. That isn't healthy. And I do get paid off of my looks and my body. But I would, just like a drug addict, sneak out at night, not turn the car lights on, and have cash, not with the debit card that I had taken out $5 at Walgreens, and I would go get a cheeseburger. And then I'd come in and my heart would be racing, like, I hope he's not inside, because he would condescendingly say stuff or take my debit card, but it was never anything overt to where I thought it was so serious that it was like, oh, this is scary. He would always do it almost in a joking manner. So it was like, oh, he's just looking out for me because of my career, and he doesn't want me to get, gross. And so I excused it, like most survivors / victims usually do.
Sorry, I had to cough. I do remember, like, a couple times, like, little weird things like that happening. Not with the food, but maybe we were talking at work or whatever, or maybe it was when we were out looking at properties together, like, your debit card wouldn't work. And at that time it was because he was shutting it off. Right. Yes. So that was what he liked to do. He liked to hit a little button and say, don't think you can do what you want to do because I hold everything.
Yes. And that became a problem towards the end. Well, and you had mentioned earlier too, I didn't even recognize that was going on so early on. But if if it got too volatile in the house, I would take my daughters, and we would, or if it was just one daughter at that time, I hadn't had my second one yet, I would take them to a hotel for the night until everything calmed down. I'd come back the next day. I never threatened, divorce or I'm leaving you. He always knew. It wasn't like, well, she just disappeared with the children. He always knew, I'm going to a hotel till things cool down and I'll come back. But if I drove off with the debit card, he'd disconnect it. And I got several times to the hotel and they ran it through and they're like, it's not working. And which would infuriate me, but it would also make me feel so suffocated and trapped that I would spiral. It would make me so upset because that was my one way of taking a step out so it didn't get so bad, and he was forcing me to stay there. And so I started taking $100 out at the ATM, occasionally telling him it was for makeup from a friend or something like that.
Right.
And then having that. So if I needed to go to a hotel, and then when he realized that was happening, if I had left, now when I say go to a hotel, this didn't happen once a week. It happened probably once every 5 or 6 months, just so everyone understands. I wasn't just constantly like, I'm out. But it got to the point where if I had left, he knew I had that cash because he'd shut it off before and I still stayed gone, that he would contact me and say, come back now or I'll call and report the car stolen by you and you'll be arrested. And because the car was in his name and I had the children and he threatened kidnapping quite often towards the end, I did not know the laws. I also did not know that I would be saved by any law enforcement that were local because he was local law enforcement. So I would have to return.
And he's high up in law enforcement.
Yes.
And I will tell you guys from the outside, like there's a couple times where I've already shared that where I thought he was doing some weird stuff. But on the other hand, there was a night where I was having a problem where I was living. And I texted Jacqueline, you may not even remember this. I texted you at like 2:00 in the morning. And you got your husband on the phone and your husband called me. And he said, we're sending somebody out. You don't even have to come out. You'll know because stay on the phone. They'll shine a flashlight and you'll know they're there. I mean, you didn't know me anything. I was just thinking whether or not I should call 911. It was wonderful. I mean, but it was, can we talk about, I forgot if we could talk about the paper or the boat. Can we talk about that? The boat incident? No.
I don't know.
Okay.
I think that's too descriptive.
Yeah. So I will tell you that he has received high accolades for his service. Very, very high up. And I think it's important also to point out that when I say Jacqueline and I weren't best friends, I don't think even if we wanted to be, we could have, because her friends were other officers' wives. And you couldn't talk to them or anything really about what was going on because he would have found out. Right.
And that was a very tight-knit community.
Right. Yes. So you had a peer group, but it was almost like Scientology that they would have reported on you.
Yes.
So I keep interrupting her and I don't mean to. It's just that we had an agreement that we would,
not let me
try to lead into things, and I'm still trying to figure out where organically some of this stuff fits in. So we talked about the jobs, we talked about modeling. Now you're in school, you're having some issues like everybody has, nothing major, nothing super big, but you were prescribed some medication for things like anxiety or whatever. And do you want to tell them how he started controlling you?
Sure. I was, because I went back to school, I've been diagnosed with ADHD years and years ago. And the medication I needed again, once I went back to the stringent, very difficult to get into 4-year program that I busted my butt to get a 3.9 just to get into the program. And so I needed my medication. Plus I was also in my 30s going to school with 18-year-olds who were able to retain knowledge like nobody's business. And looking back now, I also know that, which I didn't know at the time, retention and memory problems are very common with PTSD in abuse victims. And I could not retain information at all. So I got back on my medication that I had been on for many, many years prior. And it's the type of medication you cannot cold turkey. It has really severe withdrawal symptoms. And he would get to the point where he started a day or two after I had filled my medication, he would flush it. And then he would go get the same prescription and hold it and say, once any of the withdrawal symptoms would start, or my body would start shutting down, he would say, if you need some, you ask me, I'll leave you one on the counter. And then he would start divvying it out only if I did the things that he said, which were never, ever, over the top things. It was usually, I need the house clean, or, hey, I have a paper for work that I need you to write for me. Or I'd have to beg if I had a test for the medication so that I could study for my exam. Mm-hmm. So he would continue to control that. And the months that it would continue to occur, I would finally, okay, it's time to go refill my script. Mm-hmm. I would refill it, and then he would flush it. And then during that time too, he was always very undermining with the way he would talk down to me about taking the medication. However, he was getting it and divvying it out to me. Mm-hmm. And it became a very unhealthy relationship to where I was even more dependent on him mm-hmm. for health reasons now. And to succeed in my program that I had, it started spiraling out of control because it felt like I can't continue to retain this knowledge. I can't do well on the tests. I was really struggling with that. He was working nights. So when he came home during the day, he needed the baby to sleep during the day while he slept. Mm-hmm. So I'd be at school all day long, and him and the baby would be sleeping. So I'd get home at 6 p.m. He'd go to work. The baby would wake up at that time. Mm-hmm. So she'd be up all night. And in order to receive any type of, okay, well, sorry, I let her sleep all day, I left you medicine on the counter for you to take tomorrow morning so that you're able to focus better. Mm-hmm. So it just became such a very, very unhealthy codependent relationship to where I needed him to survive practically.
Yeah, I remember Jacqueline was in school. She was she was living down the street from my mom at the time. Yes. And so I would, we lived far apart at that time, I would mm-hmm. say. But I would still see her every once in a while because I could visit my mom. And I can remember talking on the phone with you when you were going through the medication stuff. And I just thought, I didn't know he was, well, you did tell me he was flushing it. You did. Yeah,
I think I mentioned it, but I think I had only mentioned, it happened once or twice. And, mm-hmm. and I don't think I mentioned to the extent of that I was begging him for his and, doing favors, not gross favors. Just
no.
House favors or doing whatever his bidding, mm-hmm. whatever he wanted in order to not be in withdrawals and be able to function properly.
Everything was quid pro quo.
Yes.
Everything. But it was at his right. demands. Like, it's never like, it wasn't like this, because
right.
All right. And so is there anything else that he used for control? We know he used finances, he used medication, he controlled your social environment.
Yes.
Did you feel like, I don't think I've asked you this, did he monitor your phone? Things like you did tell me the night you broke your shoulder. Tell them that. What he was doing when you had your phone for a long time.
He had taken my phone, and he had said that he didn't have my mom's number, which was bizarre. We had been married for 10 years. He had her number. He would always call her behind my back and attempt to poison that relationship just so that he would be able to isolate me further and gaslight the whole situation and plant stuff, because he was very good at slow planting people's perception of me so that if anything ever did come out, he could say, well, look, she's crazy. I've been telling you forever. But he did take my phone outside to call my mother and was gone for 40 minutes. And when he came in, I didn't, obviously in that whirlwind, didn't realize until a week later when I was trying to go through my phone and gather up stuff that I needed for court or for any other purposes. And a lot of stuff had been deleted on my phone. I also know that in those 10 years, he took a lot of tactical courses and would come home and share things with me that was fun or funny or interesting, where he had taken different courses taught by, CIA members or FBI members or something like that on how to do secret surveillance on people's phones or something. So he knew how to install apps that you could never find on your phone. Those type of things that I wasn't aware of. So that also started preying in. And then after he was A couple weeks later, this fast forward, when I did report it, he was arrested and removed from the home. And when I knew he was in jail, I was able to return to the house with my children to either stay there until he was released and I had a restraining order, or we felt safe, which never occurred. But when I got back to the house, I was able to go through and see if there was anything else there. And I did find in our master bedroom, he had a camera that I never noticed that was disguised as a speaker of a home system. So we had like 4 or 5 speakers set up in our bedroom for this sound system that all of the speakers looked similar. I never noticed. And it was a recording camera pointed at the bed that he was able to access remotely. And I had found that after he had been removed from the home, and I had found videos on our desktop that I went through that computer like nobody's business, because I was like, what else do I not know? I would spend night after night in that spiral where I felt trapped in that house and go through everything I possibly could find. And I found videos of just me sleeping on the hard drive. He had just recorded me sleeping in the room at night while he was at work. He was able to tap in and watch me while he was at work, and I just had no idea. I also, when we had returned to the house too, found that the back doors to the alarm system had been snipped so that they didn't make the bing bong noise when he came in and out. So that was another form of control with the cameras. But who knows what I had on my phone or my car. After, in the weeks that I left too, I noticed that he had been following me too and knew where we were. So I felt like there was GPS on me. That was just
probably was. And I think there was a discussion about being worried about him having access to your car, because we're kind of speeding ahead, and it's okay.
Right. Yeah. Sorry.
No. Do not apologize. It's okay. But I think there's only one thing I want to go back to, and then let's talk about this. So, we talked about sabotaging the work, sabotaging the modeling, sabotaging the school. There's a lot involved there. We'll kind of just leave it there and say he completely mentally abused you while you were trying to get your degree. Humiliated you and abused you.
Yes.
In like the most horrific way a wife can be treated. And we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Unless you want to talk about it. I can't.
I mean, we could, yeah. It was just a public humiliation that, of infidelity within my community of my school.
Right. So then there's a point where you're driving around and he's threatening you, and you have to always worry about, like, I don't want to make accusations, but what runs to your mind is like, how far will somebody take this? Will they plant something in my car?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a person he wasn't this great person that always treated me with so much respect, but until it was physical, I never ever thought it would ever be physical. So I saw a different person that night, a totally different person. It was like the rug was pulled out from under me, and I was shocked at the person in front of me. So after that, I didn't know where the line or limit was. I didn't know who I was dealing with any longer. And people would always say, like, oh, well, I'm sure he wouldn't do something like that. And I said, well, I never thought he'd do anything, physical to me or hurt me.
Oh, and he's like surgery.
Right.
Yeah, you had multiple surgeries.
I had one, but I had to have metal implanted and utilized to keep all my bones together from here all the way down. So I have what my kids and I like to jokingly call a robot shoulder. I tell them that mommy's half robot, so it makes it kind of cool. But it made me feel like I was a little bit more of a tough, strong person in that moment, that I was like, well, I'm half robot. I can do whatever I want now. No, I can take any kind of hits. So, but yes, I had to have reconstructive surgery that now is permanently part of my body.
Right. That's horrible. So I just keep thinking about how, like, I saw him one way, and it's just, I can't even imagine like what your experience was. So we'll go back to the night that all of this happens. You have your go bag because you're done with the emotional abuse, the financial control, controlling your prescriptions, controlling what you wear.
Yes. And I was already trying to get out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was, my mother doesn't live in this state, but that's why she was in town, and thankfully, so she was able to come over and get me to the hospital. She was in town to help my daughters and I find in a different county a new apartment, which he was going along with. We were going to separate and see how that went. But once that threat of the loss of control that he had put on him started weighing on him, he started acting out of control because he was starting to lose the control. And then I think that was why this was such an apex of the events, because he was losing all control of me and of everything of his entire life that he had managed.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I'm just going to remind everybody, I'm talking with Jacqueline, who is her survivor of domestic abuse, which I'm not supposed to say on YouTube, but I've just decided that if we use other words, we diminish the act.
Right.
And so I really don't care tonight. And I certainly, I really don't give a, you know what, because Jacqueline's my friend. But this is a open and uncensored discussion about living through and escaping domestic abuse, and please be advised that this content may not be suitable for all viewers. So we've heard it a second time, and I'm really sorry. Please come back another time. I totally understand. So we know that the most dangerous time for a woman, or let's not even say woman. Let me stop right there. I'm being really ADD. This is something we have in common. If you look in the description of this video, I tried to put every support number I could think of in there. So if you're a male in a domestic abuse situation, a female, if you're single, if you're a teen in a domestic dating violence situation, if you are African American, if you are Asian, if you are LGBTQ, TQ, if you are blind, if you are deaf, and like, I have legal resources. I have hotlines. I have links to emergency plans that you can download. And almost every single one of these, because I checked them myself, has what they call I think like some of them call escape and some of them call clean getaway button. So if you are looking at them on your phone, there was always going to be a big button on there. So if someone comes up over your shoulder, it's going to go somewhere else and it's not going to be in your history. Okay, so they are, I mean, I can't 100% guarantee you guys, but there are safe places to be and there is help out there. So we know that the most dangerous time for a person when they're in this kind of a relationship is when they leave and after they leave. So why don't you tell us about, as much as you want to share, what happened when you actually left and what avenues you took and how you navigated that process?
That is very true. Like, leaving it's the most dangerous. A lot of people, I see it in, I'm a part of a lot of DV groups. It's really helped me heal, seeing that other people, I may not communicate or comment much on them, but seeing other people go through the same thing helps validate all the feelings that you felt when you were there and all the things that they were portraying, that you're crazy or that this is all you. Even when you leave, a lot of that healing has to take place, and being amongst peers or just in a group where you read where other people are feeling the same thing helps kind of chip away at that. It's not me. This is across the board, very textbook kind of stuff. It happens in most situations. Sorry, I digress. So
you're fine.
But leaving is the most dangerous, and people really have a problem with, and sometimes I even have to check myself and say, well, why are you still in that, not to the person, why are you still in that situation that's so dangerous? But leaving, one, you're financially dependent. Leaving sometimes isn't even a financial option. Had I not had my mother, who aggressively helped me financially when I left, I would not have been able to even feed my children, and would have had to probably have gone back just so that my children were able to bed. I had a roof over my head because all my accounts and bills and everything were turned off when I left. I did not have a bank account when I left, and I had a full custody of 2 small children. So,
and you had like what, $100 in cash?
Yes.
That she had saved. Like every time she went to the grocery store, kind of, you would like take like what, $10
extra $5, extra $10. Yes, because that wasn't able to be recognized. And about 2 days after everything was reported, he closed our bank accounts. So I had no access, and the system is not quick. So it is not like I could go down to the courthouse and file and say I need my money, because I did that several times, and in 3.5 years they never once set a hearing to go ahead and see if I can be financially taken care of or get half of the money that that was mine, just because it didn't work. It was still half mine. But leaving is very dangerous. And that's typically when the abuser feels like they no longer have control. That's when they no longer have control over the facade that they had put up to the community, to friends, to family, that they had created to make the person who's abused look crazy. That breaks down, and they're no longer able to continue that fake facade any longer. And that's when bad things start happening and people snap. And after I had left, it took me about a week and a half in a hotel to even decide to report it, because I had been told throughout the end of our relationship, including the night that my mother, or more early morning that my mother was taking me to the hospital, he told her as well, if you report any of this, I will be the one that is arrested, and I'll never see my children again. And he even looked at me and my mother, and he said, I am the law. So those kind of things planted in your head, especially when I know I was a part of the community. I know that if I had called those people, they stick together like family, which in bad times is a great thing. They need each other, because especially when, people are turning against, it's a tough time to be law enforcement, which I do still support law enforcement. It's a very tough time to be law enforcement. So they learn to really have each other's backs, but it also means that they will not turn in one of their own. And so I knew leaving that I didn't know what to do. So my mother and I kind of, with the children, sat at a hotel for a week and a half thinking, what are we going to do? What can I do? How do I get away? How do I tell anybody what just happened? Is it true? I wanted to research. Is it true that if I do report it, am I going to go to jail and lose my children? Is there a way that that's going to happen? Can he twist it? So we had to talk to some people and figure out what the heck to do. And he finally, after a week and a half, and not even knowing where his children were, or not even checking on his children, decided to reach out to my mother and say, I want to see my kids now, or I'm going to call and say you kidnapped them. So my mother and I, both being very naive and just really scared in this situation, said, okay, how about we set up a meeting? I said this, how about I set up a meeting at his father's house? Because at that time, I also trusted his father as one of my own family members. So I figured, well, he, is my family too. So,
and let me just tell people, I hate to interrupt you, but Jacqueline stayed with her husband's mother while she was dying. You took care of his mother. You were very close to his mother. I was. And
so that family was considered my own.
Yeah. So this wasn't like her, like, oh, I'm,
right.
This was like you were part.
Sorry, my dog is like begging me to go out.
Your dog could be part of it. Do you need to take your dog out?
No, it's okay. She sits there and coughs. That's her thing. So if you hear someone coughing in the background, it's my dog trying to get attention. I apologize. Go lay down. So I thought, stupid me, that if I had his father there, what could go wrong? His dad can listen, to what I had to say. I also thought, well, his dad only heard one side of what happened that night. I want him to know what his son did to me.
Right.
And I thought that I called him dad. I thought he would say, oh my God, I can't believe my son did that. And I thought he'd be a voice of reason in his head and say, let's get this on the right track to where you guys can get a divorce, get separated, and manage the kids to where it didn't spiral out of control. I was willing to take one for the team as long as we could make it as easy as possible for the children and not turn it into something disgusting, messy, and that spiraled out of control and just became a hate fest.
Right.
And so I agreed and said, if your father's there at your house, I'll bring the children over. I want to talk to him first with you there. And then you can, have the children for the evening, not overnight. And he said, okay. So I went over to the house. I told my mom, just to not make it feel like an ambush or an attack, why don't you just wait in the car? I'll go in and speak on the porch. So the children were inside, so they didn't hear anything. And I'll just speak to him and his dad. With his dad there, nothing's going to happen.
Right.
And I was very wrong, very wrong. His father was already incredibly intoxicated, very angry. I told him what his son had did to me as calm as possible. His father looked me dead in the eyes and said, so? And I said, well, I'm not leaving my kids in this house. Like, you're angry. His father got up and tried to come at me. And thankfully at that moment, my mother had just walked out to see what was taking so long. My mother and my ex had to grab his father and stop him. My oldest daughter, we did not know this until probably roughly 6 months ago, told me that she was watching the whole time and wanted to know why Grandpa was trying to attack Mom. So at that point, that's the second time I was already so triggered and terrified. I said, I'm leaving. I've got to get my kids out of this. Like, there is no talking to these people. They will never let me get away. And so as my mom and I were leaving, my ex said to my mother and I, if you take these children, I'm calling the police that you kidnapped them, and you will be so sorry tomorrow. And we got the kids in the car, and I said, don't drive yet, Mom. I don't know what that meant. And that's terrifying. What do I do? And so I had got my kids a burner phone, and I said, I want you to keep this phone on you. I want you to go inside with your dad. And I talked to him outside the car and said, you have to be calm, or can the kids stay? He was doing his typical calm demeanor. And we drove off, and I called the police. And I said, before I just call 911 and report everything, I want to call an officer that I felt like I trusted as one of the most ethical officers that I knew. Even though he was my ex's really close friend. If you're able to call friends, I don't think he ever had what you could consider friends because of his personality. But he was the most ethical officer. And the second I told him the story, he said, I have to report this. He's my friend, but he has to be arrested. So we went back to the hotel and waited. And within a couple hours, I was contacted and said, come pick up the children. I asked them to please arrest him away from the children, escort him outside, because I knew it was going to be people he knew anyways, and it didn't need to be like that. He would go quietly. I knew he was not going to make a stink in front of his peers, if anybody, because I knew that he was going to want to control the narrative of this. And if he didn't go quietly, it would instantly play against him. And if he just went calmly, he could control the narrative and spin it however he chose to, which he did choose to spin it against me. And then after his arrest, it became probably the worst battle that I'll ever have to fight. It was worse than the abuse tenfold that I experienced living with him, because he had all of law enforcement on his side. I was now a ex-member of the law enforcement community living in a very, very small city that had reported a law enforcement officer and had them arrested.
You were like Hester Prynne of, you were a pariah in that community, and that was your peer support system.
It was.
You weren't allowed to have any other friends.
Yes.
And I'm just gonna, in a second, I'm gonna point out a couple of things that people are asking. Just
absolutely, yes.
We have to bring you back here, but you had so many problems with law enforcement that you appealed very high up in an emotional way, not in an aggressive way.
Yes.
But and were met with nothing, right? I mean, no. It's
everyone turned their backs. They wouldn't answer anything. I never attempted to go to any of the friend community and try to damage or talk down. I did send out a letter to all of the wives. Eventually, once I was able to feel like I can put my thoughts together and just to put my side out there so that they were able, because I knew they were being controlled of what they were being fed and told. It was not met with any pleasantries. A lot of people blocked me. Some people laughed. Some people told me, don't ever contact me ever again. It was a very well-written letter too. I didn't just start cursing people out, and it just wasn't met well. And it started the beginning of my need to get out of that city, a very desperate need, because I felt the cameras in the home not being safe, him being released. And then me feeling like if I had to call 911 for any reason, no one is going to help me. So I packed up one night after my surgery. I had to wait till my surgery. Packed up one night and said, all right, I'm done. And we take what we can carry. And we left the city. We didn't go over the legal amount of miles that you're allowed to move during a divorce or during a custody, so that I wasn't committing kidnapping or anything. It was a 32-mile drive. But I wanted to go over the border so that if I called 911, it was nobody that he knew, nobody that he trained, nobody that worked under him. And I would have the support. And it was also over the border back into the city that I had known for 10 years.
And established
back to my support system that was not law enforcement.
Right. A couple people are asking you, they're very concerned. They're saying, Amy, is she safe speaking about this now? So I'll let you answer that, because I did talk about this in the beginning, but I think it's good that it's her. They're very concerned that maybe you're put in a position that.
I believe since it's almost 4 years, all of the court battles are completed, finalized, including my divorce, my custody, and his criminal hearing and everything. I saw someone ask earlier. Yes, he returned back to work. He received no type of slap on the wrist or anything. He was able to return. However,
and be promoted.
Yes. Oh, yes. However, I don't feel like it's all that great in the community with him any longer. I just feel like they stick together. However, they still are human and still judge. I think he was outcasted. Still has his job, but I don't think anybody really, I think they knew who he was, but they're still going to support him. So I'm not going to give him that credit that he, had got all of this extra out of it. Don't think he's sitting pretty right now, but that's the life that he created. But I do feel like I am safe to a certain extent that I will always have to live with. I don't think he will ever come after me, simply because I shed so much light on him and his abuses that I think if he were to do something like that, the lies and the webs that he spun in order to keep his image safe would be broken down. And that's too much for him to handle.
Right.
He was very, very concerned with his image. So if he were to do that, it would prove me right and him wrong. And that's something he could not handle. And he also is newly married. So I hope that plays a big part in his attempt to let go of a lot of his manipulation and control over me. He attempts to still try to control me and get to me through the children. But I try to keep communication to a bare minimum. Recently have only been communicating with his wife instead of him, which, trust me, if I'm willing to communicate with the wife instead of him, that says a lot. But it's a lot better environment. She's able, whether it's real or fake, she's able to speak to me like a human being. So I do believe that I am safe to a certain extent. I do, however, had to, after a long court battle, I was forced, and he did win, for my daughters and I to have to return back to the city that he lives and works in. So we do live there. We just recently returned there to have to live. However, I felt like after 3.5 years, it was tough for me at the beginning, but after 3.5 years of healing, knowing myself, learning the signs and healing, I was capable of coming back, and coming back into the situation. And I saw someone asked if I should warn his wife. His wife was a close friend of mine. she was well aware of everything that was going on, and implanted herself very heavily in the courts system and the custody. And so she knows whether she chooses to believe it or whether she chooses to ignore it. She knows exactly what occurred because she was a friend of mine.
I'm so sorry, you guys. You know, I don't know if Jacqueline knows this. I had pneumonia, and I'm not going to talk about it for more than like 2 seconds. And I just got a coughing fit, and it's like worse than the sound is watching somebody do it. So I apologize.
Oh, you're fine.
I apologize. Like, just waiting for
you're coughing.
Maybe to fly out on the camera like it's 3D.
You have sympathy coughs with my dog who's actually coughing, and she likes to dry heave. It's really disgusting. But that's her way to get my attention.
Okay, so you've left. We know that he was arrested. He was released. He went back to work without reprimand. You moved to another city. When she did, I remember I went and visited her one day, and man, that place was like a fortress. Like, I had to stick my driver's license in.
Yes, it was. It was good.
It was
hard to get in. I had him on the do not let in unless you call me. And so when he had to pick up the children, which the court system would not allow after they did for a year when I had a restraining order. But after the restraining order was dropped, when he was wasn't found not guilty, he was granted immunity for stand your ground, which is the first time that stand your ground was utilized in a civil domestic situation.
Yeah. So that's why I left. There's a comment on the screen. I don't know if you can see that or not.
Yes, I could see the comments.
Okay. So I have up on the screen, and this is a person that's very, very nice. It's not meant to.
Right. No. I could take the heat, guys.
No, but these people are so supportive, and
I
just want you to know, like they're completely like with you.
Right.
Okay. But she said a restraining order would have stopped the kidnapping BS. I mean, I'll let you answer that, but I know you had problems because, again, once one thing happened, that you no longer could have a restraining order.
Yeah.
And so and during the divorce and custody, you had a lot of it went back to emotional torture, a lot of games. He was hiding finances.
Yes. And a restraining order prevents a law enforcement officer from working. So it was pressured by him, by his job, by the community. I attended court. My court happened to be for my custody in the exact same county that he worked in, that he attended court in, that his family member, his uncle, is a police officer in the courthouse. So it was pressured that if the restraining order is dropped, he can return to work. And also it was argued by his team that if I had already moved, then a restraining order is not necessary any longer because I'm not in immediate danger. So it was dropped for that exact reason. The judge stated you are no longer in immediate danger because you moved, and you said you moved because you were scared. And since you are 32 miles away, in the verbiage of the restraining order, it says must be in immediate fear of life or immediate danger. And because it's over so they dropped the restraining order, and that wasn't something I was able to have any longer, which meant I wasn't able to control my address, keep that private, anything private, or continue to do drop-offs and pickups at public locations. It had to be at the home.
No. So let's talk about, because I don't completely remember how. I remember sitting with you one day and you telling me like all of this, and I was just like, oh my gosh, Did you end up using primarily the Services of Salvation Army?
I did.
This?
Not to get out. To get out, nothing was quick enough. That was something that I noticed that I in the years following, I've tried to do a lot of research in order to give people different types of links and stuff. And I will tell everybody that Harbor House just got a ton of funding. It is a really great place. They even have animal shelters built into the DV shelter, so that if you have pets and you can't leave, they have staff on hand to take care of the pets if you have to go work or you have children. They also have a daycare facility there. So Harbor House is really amazing. But in the moment, I had gone to Salvation Army, nerve-wracking as it was, because it was in the small, like 2 buildings down from the police department.
Yeah.
And they work very, very closely with police department because they're usually trying to help victims get away. And the police department knows where all their safe houses are. So that wasn't something that I felt safe with. But they did help me with a small, I think they helped me with a small amount to keep my electricity on, because he had shut the electricity off in our home with our children in there. And it was all in his name, so I wasn't able to turn it back on.
And you needed deposits and all that stuff even to get it in your name, and you didn't have it.
Right. But they also did help with connecting me to the people that I needed for food stamps, the people that I needed for Medicaid for my children to get on health insurance and everything like that. So they did connect me, and they were the best that they could have been. They didn't help enough to where if I hadn't had my mother, I would have still had to have gone back, unfortunately. But I'm not saying anything against Salvation Army. I think if anybody has a problem like this and needs to reach out to somebody, they really did help. However, I do want to point out 2 years after I had left, I was still struggling and wasn't able to get a job. And I was having to pay lawyer fees from the money that I had got in our house once finally the court said we could sell it and I can get a little bit. I paid all of it in lawyer fees. I went to Salvation Army and said, like, I'm struggling to pay my rent. And they really, really helped me with that, knowing that I was still, even though 2 years later, I thought, this is silly. I left 2 years ago. They probably think, well, why aren't you on your feet yet? But it's a very, very long process. And I wasn't capable of getting a job at that time because I finished my degree after I left. And I got my bachelor's after I left. And I had job search was impossible. And having both my children, my youngest started school the year I left. And with all of her struggles with her unspecific autism diagnosis, it's hard for me to even figure out how to say all of that. She was very tough. Some days were rough, and the children really needed therapy and all of that. So I didn't have financial needs, but Salvation Army helped. Harbor House is huge. I'm trying to get into a few connections with them in order to do some speaking roles with them, because it's very important to me now that I am on the outside. He cannot, I was gagged because I wasn't able to say anymore because I was in custody. In the middle of a custody battle. They were considering it defamation of his character. So once that was over, which only ended this past December, I'm finally able to heal, close the books, and I want to be able to go out and speak not just my story to give myself that healing ability after being silenced, but to help other people, because there's just so much, especially in the law enforcement community, that people don't realize that's going on. I see someone asked, is he good with the kids?
Yeah. Talk about that. Because what you can.
No, I will. No, not at all. That's been an ongoing battle that I had struggled so hard to fight to remain and keep custody. I did seek in the beginning for him to have no overnights, but 2 days every other week, so that he still saw his kids. I never sought to keep the kids from him. I'm not a vindictive person. The children loved their dad, despite, how aggressive and verbally and emotionally abusive he was towards them as well. They still love their father, wanted to see him. And I thought in a controlled environment, it would be as healthy as possible. They would still have a relationship with him, but it would be as safe as possible. However, no, he is not good with the kids. He does not have any patience any longer. He takes out everything that he wants to take out on me, on them, and he uses them to get towards me by hurting them, not physically any longer. He did, however, probably a year and a half ago, he had put my youngest in the dryer. and had closed the door and left her in there.
I remember
And that was a major issue. However, that also brings up the other issue of being in the law enforcement community with DV, is that when Child Services was contacted by my daughter's therapist, it was not reported by me. Mm-hmm. They went out to investigate it, but the investigator was one of his close friends that he worked with.
Yeah.
So it was closed out as a game. They were playing a game. So they haven't been able to have a healthy relationship with them. However, the new wife is attempting, and now with her in my communication that I have attempted to seek out several times throughout this process to try to just make it as peaceful and best for the children. She is willing to kind of step up a little bit more in interaction with the children to prevent him from having to get to that level of anger with them. And that usually has to do with homework or something like that. He has no patience and it gets really aggressive really fast. Right. The children are doing so much better now. I don't even know how I raised these two children.
I do, because you're the F word amazing.
Thank you. I looked at the beginning. I thought these kids will never turn out normal, and because the turmoil, and it was just awful. I mean, we were always scared, and in the car, and mommy's looking everywhere and checking, and they know what happened to mommy, and so, and then his type of abuse was just so psychological. But I got them in therapy really, really early. My oldest, especially, she's 11. And I started her therapy really, really early. Like, I think we started like 3 or 4 months after I left, because her anger started really coming out. And I thought she needed somebody to talk to. And obviously we have like mental health nights where we will sit, and it's probably way more often than they like, but we'll sit and we'll just talk about emotions. How do you feel? I see something, tell me everything. Let's delve into it. And let's see maybe why daddy was acting that way, not to excuse the behavior, but to understand it. And like, how can we do better? And so they're doing amazing, all things considered. And my oldest got a compliment at school the other day, and it made me cry during the parent teacher conference. Apparently she uses her teacher as a therapist, but I've always told my kids, it's your story too. So you are able to tell whoever you want. I will never tell you, don't tell people about it, because you went through it too. It's your story. So my oldest loves to scream it from the rooftops, and told her teacher, and he tells me in the parent teacher conference, I wanted to tell you that your daughter carries herself so well that if you told me what she's been through and I had to pick a kid out in this classroom, I would never guess her, because she carries herself so well for what she's been through. And it breaks my heart that poor kid had to do that and had to grow up. She had to be almost another parent throughout a lot of this, because I was just in survival mode, and with the surgery, I could barely do much. And the baby, when we left, was, she just turned 3, and she was not at a cognitive functioning level at that time. Now she is high functioning. She speaks in spades, and is probably one of the smartest people I've ever met at 7 years old. And they're just wonderful, wonderful people. And they have the compassion that I am so grateful for, because of what we've been through. They just have this compassion of anybody who is going through anything, that they understand, and they just have love for other people, and understanding that if someone's acting this way, let's give them compassion, because who knows what's happening at their house, because look what happened at our house, and we lashed out, and we weren't the nicest of people. So they just have compassion. And I hope too that leaving was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my entire life, and probably will always be the hardest thing. But I hope that it made such an impact on their lives, not negatively, but positively, that they understand that, one, you can survive anything. You are a tough woman. And two, you don't have to take anything like that from people. I didn't want them. That's why leaving was so important after that day, and never coming back, no matter how hard the struggle was, because I wanted them to understand that the second I went back after there was any kind of physical, I was teaching them that that's acceptable, and to emulate that in their life. And that was something I couldn't condemn them for the rest of their lives. I felt like as a mother, I had already done enough damage. by my choices. I mean, it is what it is. You know, I did choose this person to have children with, and stayed for as long as I did. But I felt like that was the best gift that I could give them at that moment, is the ability to see, yes, it was such a struggle, and you saw Mom pick herself up from the bottom, but that's not acceptable. So
can I brag on you for a second?
Sure.
Let me do that,
I guess.
Well, I will tell you, when Jacqueline was in the bowels of this stuff after she left, she's living behind this fortress in this place where, like, I'm not talking you have to like show your ID to a person. You have to scan it into a computer and wait for it to come back. It's intimidating. Like, you're waiting for like a cage to come down. Like, oh my God,
there's a camera in your face too, and a person comes over the speaker. Yes,
I mean, it was insane. She has the neighbor kids over, and she has like a bracelet making party, and she's buying, or she has this, not buying, but she has these cookies set up where they're all like baked sugar cookies and like a decorating station, and just like her background today when I was talking to her, she has all her Mickey Mouse headbands on the wall for dance party time, and everybody picks one and they do it. But not only that, the lengths she did go to get her children mentally healthy. I don't know if he was your ex-husband yet or not, but anyway, your ex-husband blocked the children from speaking to the guidance counselors at school. So they didn't have that outlet. And then he didn't want them to go out for private therapy. So Jacqueline found somebody that could come in. And I don't know if it was, I don't remember this correctly because I deal with some of the same issues, but wasn't it something where it didn't look like counseling because it was part of the autism stuff, and the lady came to your house?
Yes.
So she found a way, like, this woman is so smart. She found a way to get a therapist to come to her house to talk to her children without it showing up on insurance or finding out that they went to a doctor's office, because, she's not going to ask her children to lie. So she would never do that. So if their father says, are you going to a doctor? Do you tell them things or whatever? Do you go to a doctor's office? It's no. We have a friend, I'm making up a name, a friend Patty that comes over and hangs out sometimes. And that's what she did for them. And she's just like, you're amazing. You're amazing.
Thank you. I don't think I ever would have survived any of this had it not been for my children. I was just, I had a reason to fight, to survive, and to push forward. And in the worst of it, I never really felt the gravity of how bad it was, because I was just constantly survival, going through the motions every day of taking them to school, picking them up, making sure they had everything they needed. And it didn't really weigh on me of what was occurring or what I even had been through. I had to kind of go through that mentally later, because I was just trying to survive. And had I not had that for that year of distraction of focusing on them, I probably wouldn't have ever survived this, because it was just so horrible to leave like that. And I didn't have, I have my friends, which is a very small, close circle, but I don't have family other than my mother, who does live a few states away.
Right.
But other than that, I don't have anybody, especially family. I don't have siblings. I don't have
an only child.
Yes. So it was just my mother who helped as much as she was able to. She was moved far away and was in a new marriage, so I was kind of a hindrance. But it was, and then also the school that they went to was incredible. It was a very small school. The teachers were great. The principal was amazing and notified me of anything carefully that was being done. Like you had said, he did have his lawyer send out a thing to the school stating that they do not want the children speaking to the guidance counselor, period. The guidance counselor did have to contact me and let me know that they didn't want him talking. I think he thought maybe they would tell the truth and it could be used against him later.
Well, that's exactly what it was, don't you think?
Right. Yes. He did. He tried to stop the truth from coming out, and at every angle.
Yeah. Let's see. There was something I was going to ask you, and now I lost my train of thought. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Like, because I'm not going to rush it. If we don't get to Gabby tonight, that's a non-issue with me. Okay. But is there anything else you want to talk about as far as after you left? And somebody asked before about Harbor House. Correct me if I'm wrong. Harbor House is geographically local for us, right?
Yes.
So that would be if you're in the Central Florida.
Yes.
All the way to the East Coast area, basically. I think there may be one on the West Coast.
There is a huge one located in Orlando, and that is their biggest one that they're really pouring a lot into. They got a huge grant recently, so they were really able to expand and offer a lot of services to people that previously it wasn't capable of doing. I believe they have some in other states, but I would have to look into that. But Harbor House it's one of the like Salvation Army, which is also incredible. They have lots of locations.
But these, I wish I'd had, this is all on me. I wish I'd had time for Jacqueline to kind of look at some of the resources. I personally went through them. They have these, they have all kinds of planning tools for leaving, resources from your area, all kinds of things. So and again, there's something on there called a quick escape or a latch out button, which means if you're looking at it and you're worried that somebody is monitoring you,
or someone walks in the room,
right, you can get out of there right away. There's a lot of really good resources there, and I've included those all in the description. They want to know, well, first of all, True Crime with Todd says you should be a motivational speaker. And I was just about to ask you when we're going to see your TED Talk. So, because I know we are. I know you're going to change the world. I know you really are.
I would love to help out other people just because I know of the depth of the survivors who are still stuck in situations, especially law enforcement. When I was in it, I couldn't find anybody who was speaking out and saying I got out of this in a law enforcement situation. I thought there's just no hope. And if I say anything, you read all the terrible stories, but I never saw a survivor who was like, this is what happened to me. And this is my journey. And my journey was not, I didn't come out on the other end with all the wins under my belt, but I did come out on the other. Someone had asked up there, please tell me you're happy. I am happy. It was a very long journey, but I do have two of the most amazing people in my life, my daughters, that really, they're my best friends at this point, and we take it day by day. I do have a great career now that I got after completing my bachelor's degree. When I left on my own, I do have a little bit of student loans because of that, but it is what it is. But I have a great career that I'm really thriving in. I finally feel like I am contributing and great at something, and I get those accolades that I needed for so long.
Validation.
It does make it tough as a mom working so much. I've never worked a full-time job, especially while being a single mother. Our custody is now, it's 50-50, which is unfortunate. However, it is something that I fought tooth and nail until I couldn't any longer. Not personally couldn't, but the system stopped. I went as far as I could for now. The only thing is the children understand that I'm here for them constantly, and it's not a permanent situation. And one day they get to choose who's in their life. Right. And that power makes them feel a lot better that they can stick it out until they're able to make that decision. And I am starting now, almost 4 years later, attempting the dating scene, which is a nightmare. So that's a whole nother scenario, but I am happy now. Yeah. I do have my moments. I'm not perfectly okay where I can just put this behind me. I do have complex CPTSD, which is something that occurs. It's PTSD, but over a long period of time. So you were subjected to it for so long that it kind of just became a norm. So that's something that I will always have to heal from. I'll always have to continue to self-analyze myself and figure out the repercussions of all of what has happened to me, because I'm finding new things every day that I'm like, oh, that's something I should probably work on. I didn't notice that about myself, or I didn't notice that was something that came out of this.
Let's talk about this, because Mary Rose, and again, she's with good intention, says, warn your dad that they will lie about you. And I know you have a special way of addressing this, and I love it. So would you share that with us?
Well, tell me what way that you're doing, so I can lay down.
You just have an open dialogue with your children, and you're very real.
Very open.
You know, so Jacqueline never throws her ex-husband under the bus.
No.
You know, if they tell her something, she takes it very seriously and says, we'll handle it. Mm-hmm. She doesn't speak poorly of him. You know, she's just very, I don't think you know, if the children came home and said, Daddy said this about you and it wasn't true, you would sit down and say, that's absolutely not true. I have no idea what Dad would say that. And just, you know what I mean? Like,
right. Well, I take a much probably too long-winded approach, as I'm sure everyone can tell. But I am an over-analytical person. I overanalyze everything. And so I'm capable of attempting to separate emotion from it and being able to break down the why and the what of people's personality and behavior. So my children understand that we always have an open dialogue. Mom will never lie to them. And that's been something I have stuck by throughout this process, which has been really tough, because a lot of the stuff that they ask, they do understand if I tell them that it is nothing that I will discuss with them right now because it is too mature for them or something. They understand that you're not going to get me to say that. However, I won't lie to them. So, if they do come home and say, Dad said this about you, one, I've been very open with my children, and they have seen me struggle from the ground up. I don't think anybody could tell them anything bad about me that they would believe. They think their mother is a superhero at this point, which I'm not, but they've seen me at the lowest of low, and I allowed them to see not the emotional aspects of it, but the struggle that we had to go through. They knew I always took care of them at the end of the day. And their father's side, he was not consistent with anything that he said, anything that he did. He was not concerned with their well-being or their feelings. So I didn't really have to warn them about their father not telling the truth. He kind of did that himself with not following through on anything he said. And they're intelligent children. They're not babies anymore. So they
can letting him show them who he is.
Right. And you can't say you care about someone one day and treat them like garbage the next day. They know that they don't trust him anymore. And that really didn't have too much to do with what I had to say.
Right. Somebody, I'll address this. Somebody said, wow, I hope this person has a tight emotional support system. So at the beginning of this show, I told you guys, usually I introduce a guest. I actually brought Jacqueline up on screen and we talked about what we're going to talk about tonight, because I want you guys to know I didn't coerce her to come on here. She's ready to talk. She wants to talk. And I told her, you know, several times, like, this is about you, what you want to talk about, at what level. And I had other people that maybe wanted to share their stories, and I was hesitant because I am not a therapist. I have no medical qualifications, you know. Well, maybe like one little one, but not anything like where we could talk. And my little itty bitty one. But I wouldn't want to bring anybody on here that, what's the word for trigger, Jacqueline? Like have it, like, realize once they started talking about it that they weren't ready and fall into this place. And I can't be responsible for that, because I can't help them.
Right.
You had to know that somebody was emotionally healthy. And you said, I'm getting ready to talk about this anyway. I want to do it. So I want you guys to know that. You're getting.
She had approached me at the right time. It was the week before she had even approached me with this. I had reached out to a DV shelter and said, like, I want to volunteer. I want to help. I would like to speak, or at least they offer classes to law enforcement, not for law enforcement people who are involved in domestic violence, but sorry, DV, but for when they interact with people on the job who are involved in DV and how to better handle it. I said, I would like to be a part of those classes if I can. And I was really ready to get out there and start, because I feel as healed as I can be at this point in my life, which I will always continue to heal. And especially with starting, attempting to start dating, and opens a whole new can of healing that I'm going to have to go through, because that comes with stuff that I don't even know what it's going to trigger or open up or unravel. So, but I have got to a point where I have done a lot of work on my own, and because I had to, for 3 years, I had to be quiet. So it was something where if I was going to be the best mother I possibly could be for these children who were really relying on mommy and only mommy, and their world was falling apart, I needed to do the work privately that I possibly could to get to a level where I was as good as I could be, to where I wasn't shutting down. And I mean, that was a must. It wasn't an option.
And they're amazing. I mean, they've gone through 3 schools in 3 years? Is that about
They
right?
were able to stay at that last school. We'd have to go to different houses, but they were at that last school for 3 years, 3 school years, and we kept them at. And they just started a new school now when we had to return.
But you're on your 3rd place in like 3 years, right? Because he fourth. This is a whole nother thing. Before everything was stopped, he demanded through the court and won that she move. If she didn't move, he was going to get full custody. Is that what the deal was?
Yes. The deal was if I didn't return back to the city, because
where everything happened.
Yes. And where he works, and where I have no family and no support system. If I didn't return, he got full custody, and I was able to get 2 overnights a month. And that's going from full custody. I mean, 70 to 80% is what I had up until that. Great. So if I returned, it was 50-50. So it was no.
Yeah, it was horrible. It was horrible. I think when you talked about wanting to get involved with law enforcement for dealing with, we're not going to say DV, we're just going to say what it is. I'm not going to diminish it with that thing. Domestic violence. Did you, and there's no pressure here, did you get an opportunity to watch the
I did not. I'm being honest.
We'll come back and do that another night. No, that's fine. So doesn't matter to me one bit. Well, that gives us an opportunity to kind of we're probably going to go another 15 minutes and maybe take some questions, because I know you have work in the morning and everything else. I don't want to keep you up all night. I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize.
I'm so grateful to you for sharing everything you are and being as transparent as you are. But let's talk about some of the things that happened before everything was resolved. So there were, and I'll bait her a little bit. I know there were incidences where he would show up at school events and trigger your children. Yes. For a while, you were very fortunate. There was a good school resource officer there. So
he was wonderful.
Talk about that, and talk about how they were trying to make you apply for jobs and stuff. You remember when you had to do some weird things with that? You had to take these surveys that were really, I don't even know what the word is for it. It was almost like repeating the abuse and the control.
It was that the type of abuse that I witnessed at the hands of the system who facilitated him to continually abuse me. It's so sad. And the people involved in the system are just so unaware of the warning signs or anything that people say. And especially for abusers or narcissists or any people of that type, of their typical behavior. They were totally unaware, but at the school, at the beginning, you know, we had a restraining order in place. He wasn't able to see the children for a while. And I did petition the court to give him a few hours every other Saturday. Because I did want him. I was not trying to keep the children from him. I did not want the children to think that. I did not want him to think that. And I thought and he was living with his father at the time. So I thought, which we all know, his father wasn't that great, but I knew in that type of environment, and when he was under a microscope, currently under a criminal investigation, he's going to be on his best behavior. My children knew all the ways to get out, to call, the burner phone, everything that I had taught them and instructed them. But the biggest saving grace was when I did leave, and I encourage anybody who decides to leave or is gearing up to leave, is I became a part of the community that I had moved into, precisely with the school. That was the biggest thing. Is I had gotten in there first. I had talked to the principal. I had let the resource officer know. I was very open and not hiding any longer, because I saw after 10 years of telling nobody and hiding it all, it got me to where I looked like I was crazy and lying. And he looked like he was just this wonderful.
Well, that's what he was trying to do to you. He was
right. And so I realized going into it and keeping it only hurts me in the end, because then people think when it comes out, they've never heard anything like this, that you never even mentioned that he wasn't nice to you. So I went in and I spoke to everyone separately in the school. I gave them a heads up exactly what happened. I gave them the court documents and the restraining order. However, we went to every single school function, every single Saturday function or after school function that the school had. They had Halloween parties, and they had STEM parties that were after hours. The school was incredible, but we went to all of them. And I made sure that when we went to them, we formed a really close community with them. And that was so important, because when he was capable of becoming involved in all of that, he wasn't capable of coming into our world that we had created and polluting it with his lies and manipulation about me or my children, and twisting it and turning it against us. We had created such a tight-knit community of people that had already gotten to know us, and that I had forced myself in a time that I just really wanted to be in a shell or in my dark bedroom for every day, all day, forced myself to go and get involved with the people, and our neighbors as well. And the children of the neighborhood, my children needed to become friends, but it was mainly the school. We were just very involved. I volunteered. I came on any of the volunteer days, their field day. I went on all the field trips, because I wanted them to know, this is me, get to know me, because you're going to hear eventually stuff that he's going, when he's allowed to. And then that is what happened, is when he was allowed to finally return, he did not become involved in the children's school or in their education or trying to help them. He became involved in the attempt to manipulate or get to me through them by attending lunch with the children and attending it only with his new girlfriend and upsetting them. And my oldest she had panic attacks. She was diagnosed with anxiety disorder. So she would have panic attacks and call me, and Dad's here. And it would always come down with, you manipulated her into not liking me. You must have told her all these things about me. And he would never listen. Like, no, it's your presence there, especially with your new girlfriend, and forcing her to eat lunch. She doesn't know her. And your presence at her school, which has become her their kids' safe place. Yeah. It's not, mommy's not there, daddy's not there. That's the one place that the abuse hasn't touched. And you're coming in and forcing them to eat lunch. And so I remember the very first, my youngest had a kindergarten graduation and performance on stage. And he showed up with his girlfriend at the time and his father, which is very common for them. They always came together to anything they knew I was going to be alone at. This resource officer, I had mentioned to him that my ex, regardless of whether or not it is legal, he will still have a gun on his hip, hidden under his clothes. And especially in a school, which is not legal. He does not work there. He wasn't on duty, and it's not in his county. However, I can see it because I was used to seeing the bump on there, and it made me very uncomfortable. And the resource officer stood behind me the entire performance. While I sat alone, I didn't have, the family that they all sat, and he just stood behind me. And every once in a while, he'd tap me on the back. So I knew he was still there. He was a very, very amazing person. All the while, my oldest was having a panic attack in the clinic, waiting for me to take her home. But
and they were watching her. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you were so established in that school that they were watching your oldest.
They were taking care of her, yes.
So that
I trusted them.
Yeah, so you could get through 5 minutes of watching your littlest.
So she didn't feel like anything was going on. Yes, I never wanted them to see everyone show up and mom fall apart, or everything hit the fan, and so then it just would perpetuate their feelings of nervousness when everyone was together. So it was always pleasant. Recently, it's become because I had reached out and finally they agreed that when we do attend school functions, we will attend together. I'm at the place now where I feel comfortable doing that. Not comfortable happy, but comfortable safe. So we attend school functions together. The kids have been overjoyed by that. They've called everyone in their phone book and my phone book to tell them afterwards my parents were in the same room and everyone was talking. So it was a really big deal.
So important. We're doing that now too.
It's tough. I mean, I may have left and cried in my car alone, but I do what I do.
I do sometimes. I mean, we're finally at a point where like my stepchildren, their dad and their mom and her husband can all communicate. Now there's limitations and boundaries.
Right. Which always have to be in place. And yes. And like I've told my daughters, I will give 110% to this. It may regress, we may hit speed bumps. And I've said that to my ex and his wife as well. None of us are perfect and we're all going to say stuff that's going to trigger someone else or piss someone else off. And we're not going to be able to get through it. But as long as we all agree to go through the motions of the bumps and not let it spiral out of control and go back to the dark place that we were all at, it really benefits the children. Now I do know, and I am not stupid. I know that the attempt on their part is not coming from a place of, from his part, is not coming from a place of genuineness. It is too difficult for him. That's at times where I just deal with his wife now because he is. If
it's keeping the peace,
right? Exactly.
This is my thing. Like
the kids don't need to know that it's not genuine. They don't need to know what's happening. As long as it's all, I'm not stupid. I know what's going on, and I could still put on a good face. They're not fooling me. But
because you see an immediate change in children when that attention is taken away. It is like it's like removing a filter.
Right. It really was. It was like a veil that was over all of them.
Yeah.
And it was very important for me too, because we had just moved in the city. They knew that mom was probably going to struggle with this move, which I did. I tried to do it behind closed doors. It was tough. I had to go through a couple weeks of just going within and dealing with my own mental health. It was a tough move back into the environment that I had spent 10 years kind of being tortured in. But I wanted them to see, we all can get along, so that they didn't fear for me, because that's a lot of what they fear for is mom. They worry about mom all the time.
They do. And that, that's not something I think, well, I don't know. They're your children, but you have I think you have naturally very independent children.
I do.
But you also have very empathic children.
Yes.
And, like I said, Jacqueline and I'm not going to portray this like, we like see each other every Friday night for Wine Down Wednesday.
Right.
On Friday, whatever, Amy.
I wish.
Can you tell I do a lot of socializing? I don't even know.
It's Monday mornings.
But, I've been over like when they're getting ready for school or something like that. And they're just so like they just have this autonomy about them. And I think that a lot of that, some people would look at it and say, well, it came from everything else and they're trying to mother you. But I really think honestly that it's because you've taught them to be that way, that you don't need, I think you've taught them that you don't need anybody to take care of you.
I hope I have. I
Your
think
mommy. But you know what I mean? Like, I've never seen a 5-year-old get their clothes together, put on. I mean, put her own hair in a little ponytail. Like,
she's also very, that's a lot of part of her little isms that I like to call them, that go along with her diagnosis. But she is very independent. But I call my youngest the mother of the house. She's 7. She will call me from her dad's and be like, "How was work today? Did you get there on time? Anything crazy happen at work? What did you do? What time did you get home?" I'm like, "Yes, Mom. I'm okay here." They're just very mature. They had to grow up. But my youngest, I feel like that was just her from the beginning.
Your oldest is kind of a little yenta.
Yeah. I have very opposite children. Very opposite.
Yeah. She's funny. She'll totally dish to you if you let her.
Oh yeah.
Very protective though too. Like, she's kind of like figuring you out. Like, are you using me, or are we just having a conversation? You know? Right. Yeah.
I've tried to teach them both my empathic ways, and my youngest, because her brain is different, because we've had to do a lot of discussion about social interaction and how to communicate socially and interact with other people and peers and teachers and all that stuff, just because that didn't come naturally to her, and how to read emotions and how to show your emotions on your face a little kinder, or she actually picked up on the empathic qualities a lot easier, even though that wasn't innate in her. And she just analyzes people, but she does it to her almost a clinical standpoint. She'll be like, "That person did that weird smile, and that's probably because they're uncomfortable." And I'm like, "Wow, that's really good." She doesn't feel that, but she was just taught that, and she knows how to regurgitate that information now. So I feel like that I've attempted to give them the best tools with their father, that they can more understand a little bit where he's coming from, which doesn't excuse the behavior. They understand that as well, but understanding why the people respond the way they do, and takes it off of they're doing it because it's your fault, or they're doing it to you because you caused it. You're trying to explain their behavior because of something that occurred within them. So I hope that takes it off them. So,
all right. So let's end this doing 2 things. Biggest piece of advice for somebody that might be, I mean, I know you don't want to give unsolicited advice, and everybody's situation is different, and there's different risk management and levels. I want to be responsible of this. Like, we're not diagnosing or anything like that. But so maybe we'll say this. What do you wish you would have known that she could have gone back to do differently, like when you were leaving? Is there something that...
There's 2 things. I would have made sure that I had developed my own self, to where when I left, I had something to fall back on for my children's well-being, especially.
You couldn't, because everything was sabotaged.
Right.
I watched it happen.
But I could have, I could have done it carefully in a way that I just didn't see it as an issue. Recognizing red flags and not excusing them is a huge thing, because that was something that I made so many excuses for, that I didn't recognize it was a red flag. And then the biggest advice, and I have to be really careful when I say this, because I want everyone to understand that this isn't across the board. It could be dangerous for some people, is tell somebody, tell anybody, tell somebody, so that there's documented evidence or proof of what's going on as it's going on. Even if it is just a third party, that isn't a part of the scenario, that won't do anything about it. Someone needs to know that you are being abused emotionally, physically, however it is, because if you do have to go through that fight, leaving is not the entire battle. It's usually the courts afterwards, and proving it, and evidence, and all of that aspect. That when it's just you for 10 years who said nothing, and it looks very it doesn't look real, especially when the abuser is really quick to cry that you're a liar, you make it up and you're crazy. And they're really good at that. So tell somebody, document it somehow that you can throughout the time, even if it doesn't feel like abuse and you never plan on leaving and it never even turns out to anything. Have someone know, or a folder or something somewhere that says this happened on this day. Or someone that can go and testify one day that said, yeah, they told me on that day that he did this or that.
What if you email to like another account that you own and you never use the password on your computer? Things like that.
Right.
Helpful.
But people are the best asset in a trial, is when they can get up there and say, yes, this person confided in me. But I know that's difficult. And like I said, I want everyone to understand you got to be safe. Don't go out there and share it if you know you're not in a safe position where you're capable of doing that.
Well, and I think the other thing is just, gosh, it's so hard for me to comment because I don't want to be like, you can get out and it's going to be okay, because it's not for everybody. And in some cases, you're $20 or $30 away from having to go back to your abuser. $20 or $30.
Yes.
You know, that's what you're short on a place to live, or that's what you're short. So it's rough. And so I don't want to give, false hope. Reach out.
One more thing, Amy, I want to mention, because I had read it earlier. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. It popped in my head. I had read earlier, someone said, how can you help somebody who will not leave a person even after they had lost their children in custody, or lost their children to, I think it said, child services. I do want to stress with everybody, so that other people don't take this on, especially family members, for someone who is in it. There is nothing that you can say to a person who is living in that will make them pack up and just leave. They are dealing with so much. It is not on all of the people in your circle to save somebody, and it's not something that you can do. And being there for them and helping them, yes, I'm not saying don't do that, but they will leave when they are able or ready to leave, and that not a minute sooner. And there is no amount of a support system that will be able to make someone leave before they're ready mentally to get out and leave.
Well, I'd even asked you that.
Yeah.
What was it last week? I was like, I carry a lot of guilt because I saw things back before your second daughter was born. And you told me there was nothing I could have done.
Nothing. No.
But
nothing you could have done, nothing someone as close as my own parents could have done. It was just something, had anybody even told me anything negative, the amount of emotional abuse that I was going through would probably have me cut that person out, as opposed to my husband. Because everyone outside is dispensable, because the abuser has made you reliant on them. So leaving doesn't even seem like a possibility. And you lose a lot of friends throughout that process, because if someone speaks up and says you got to leave, now we know that you don't like this person, and now we're scared for you too. You're seeing the cracks and everything. But it points out an insecurity within us, because we can't leave. Sometimes it's just not a possibility until it's not optional any longer. And that was my thing. I probably never would have left had it not gotten physical. I probably would have just lingered forever and just thrown my life away, because I needed that definitive, all right, I'm done. And I made it to the point mentally where I was done, and no one else could have gotten me to that point. And carrying guilt breaks my heart, because I'm sure a lot of people carry guilt when they're around survivors in those situations, because they feel like, oh, if I had just done more. There's nothing that you can do other than be loving, be there, offer support, and say, if you're ever ready to go, I've done the research, call me. Okay. We'll get it together. But that's the only thing. You can't force someone out of that. And thankfully, there's people out there that are attempting to monitor children's well-being in those situations. So if they have to remove the children out of that situation, they can. And sometimes that is the best thing for the children, because
that's their safety net.
Abused person can't leave. Yeah. And sometimes that is the best. The best way is the children have to get removed.
Yeah. So I know it takes time to let this marinate or whatever, but how do you feel now that you've done this for the first time?
I feel like a weight has been lifted off of me. It feels, it is the very first time that I have been able to openly speak about
I'm sorry. I'm just so
sorry.
Just so proud of you.
Happened to me that I was told, I went to court so many times and so many hours and so many years that I was told constantly either it didn't happen to you or it did, but he was allowed to, or you can't talk about this anymore because you're going to lose your kids. So those kind of feelings you lock away, and it's not like something you could just talk to coworkers about or talk to a guy you're trying to date. Like, hey, by the way, this happened to me. Yeah. It's nothing that is, you have a really good platform to be able to release it. Right. And after so long of being silenced, it feels really good to be able to get that story out, not just for myself, but because I feel like I went through all of this, something has to come out of it. And hopefully, the knowledge or the help of maybe just one other person means that, something came out of all of what I went through. And it feels freeing to be able to finally talk about it after not being able to say a word and being told by everybody that I'm, a liar or I need to be quiet because I'm hurting someone's career. But so I do really appreciate the platform, and I appreciate everyone's comments. Everyone's been so kind.
Stop that. I told Jacqueline before we did this that this is a good community and people are supportive, and I don't even have to worry about that. But I really am proud of you. When I tell you, like, she had stacks of papers, like, 2 feet high, that you would go through and pull things out because people would say, "Oh, well, that's not true." And Jacqueline's like, "Oh, you MFer, I'm going to find it."
Yes. I managed my cases like I still have boxes of casework.
It's like Erin Brockovich up in there. Yeah. She's just like held it. And I know that your story can help other people and to bring awareness. And this is just the beginning for you. And quite honestly, sitting here tonight, I'm looking down because of my ADD. You know how that goes, right?
Yes, I do.
We look here because if I look at you, I'll get distracted. But I just, even what you shared with us tonight, it's like, I'm so sorry this happened to you, but the universe has given you a gift. And it's the gift of sharing and maybe impacting other people's lives. And, even if it's not, even if it ultimately doesn't end up like, rescuing a woman from an abusive situation, maybe it'll be standing up in court and changing laws.
Right.
There are a lot of times where, like, you would tell me things and I unfortunately knew, like, I can't think of a specific example, but you would say, "Can you believe the judge wouldn't approve this, or they're making me do this?" And I really wanted to say, like, "Oh my God, that's crazy," or whatever. But and not for abuse, but because I had been through the court system for different situations, I couldn't even like encourage you because I was like, this happens. Like, they don't really look at anything. People make up numbers, people make up stories, and then the judge says, you're like, "But we did this, and this." The judge is like, "I don't want this petty back and forth stuff."
Right. And going to court with a narcissist or an abuser is insane because you have all of the dignity in the world to tell the truth because you're under oath. They do not care. He lied up and down under oath as a police officer, and he didn't care. It didn't bother him.
No.
And he realized, if they can't tell that I'm lying, then I get away with it. And he did. And he was able to formulate any form of narrative. And I was still bound by the confounds of telling the truth and being a, just and ethical person, which I tried to continue throughout. I wasn't going to lie under oath. I mean, I feel like the story's crazy enough.
I know. No, you're not like that.
But yes, the system
we're probably like open and honest to a fault. Like when it comes to a lot of stuff. You know?
I will tell you too much.
Yeah, weird stuff will start flying out of our mouths. It's like, oh, that's inappropriate.
Right. I shouldn't have said that. Back up. That's why dating is really tough now.
That's me. I can't believe somebody like actually like publicly admits to being with me. Oh, honest to God, sometimes I'm just like, he looked at me the other night and he's like, you take things way too far sometimes. I'm like, when? He's like, you don't know when? I'm like, oh, I really don't. Need some guidance here.
Like
my last question for you is, will you come back?
Absolutely, I would love to.
Yeah? Okay. So, because I think there's more we could talk about, and we don't have to relive all this.
Right.
I think there's some other things that we can talk about, because one of the things, and if you have ideas too, and if you're open, one of the things is sometimes, like in the Gabby Petito case, we have some incredible footage, and her and her boyfriend are in the middle of this domestic thing, and the cops miss some signs. And I just would kind of want to know, like, from living through it, like what you think they missed, or what you, and I won't
absolutely
burden of you being an expert or anything like that.
Right.
But I think it would be interesting. And then there's a couple other cases too, if you're willing, but I don't want to put you in a position.
No, absolutely. I would love to. No, I would love to.
Okay. Well, good. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody in chat.
Yes, thank you. I've been reading all of the comments, so I may not have answered all of you guys, but I've been reading all of them, and I really do appreciate all the kind comments. And if you have any questions, you could direct them to Amy, or do you have some form of email or anything, Amy?
I do. I'll put it in that.
Okay. And then she can always get to me if there's any type of resources that anybody needs. She can either find them for you or reach out to me, because I do know the biggest thing I did forget to mention is the DV hotline that you had posted. My children have called that just to speak to somebody when they were at their worst moments or scared. So it's such a great resource. They can send you to whomever. They can send you to mental health professionals, actual like law enforcement, or someone or any other type of resources. They are a really, really great just generic line to call, and then they can send you out to where you need to go. But they will even sit there and put you on with a mental health person right there just to chat. And my kids anonymously have called and chatted with them if they needed to.
That's awesome. Well, of course I'm going to cough at the end. Hold on. Yeah, I mean, I had to.
All right.
Just like it was your dog. That was her dog. That wasn't me.
She went back to bed. I think she gave up on me.
Now you threw me under the bus. What are you doing? Jeez. Yeah, y'all can email me with questions, or you can put it in the comments, and I'll give Jacqueline like privileges to like do all this stuff. I don't think you need them. I think you just respond to them. But if you have a question, no matter how you want to ask it, if you want to ask it privately, you can email it to me, amy@truecrimesushi.com, or you can put it in the comments and we'll discuss it there. Again, if anybody is in crisis, I don't have all the resources you need. I have a lot of really good ones. Please check the description down below. Most of them have hotkeys, safe buttons, what have you. So if someone walks in the room and they see you looking at it, or you feel like they're going to do, it's going to get you out of that screen right away. No problem. I have resources in there for Indigenous women, for the LGBTQ community, shelters for children, almost anything I could think of, legal assistance. So, start with one of them. Just because you talk to somebody doesn't mean you have to leave tonight. They can help you prepare so that you have a plan. I've never been in this situation, but I think it goes along with like a lot of things in life. It is better to be as proactive as you can be so that you have choices, rather than be in a crisis moment and not have any. because in a crisis moment, you don't have a lot, but if you have any opportunity to plan ahead, and some people don't, then do so. So let's see. All that being said, I would love to have Jacqueline back. She said she would. We'll talk about it behind the scenes. You can find me on Twitter at Crying Sushi. Still updating all the time. You guys know I dropped a lot of Lori Vallow, Chad Dayball case interviews last night. I've been covering Gabby Petito. The one thing I'll tell you before we go is right before this, I was listening to HLN. I've got to find this documentation, but according to HLN, Northport, during a live, Northport Police Department contacted HLN and said that they never saw Brian Laundrie on the 11th. When they went out to the house, they never put eyes on him, and they never saw him after the 11th. And that they don't have Brian's phone and they don't have Gabby's phone. And that is new news to me. So that's kind of the spin. When I get off here, I'm going to work on that because it's really interesting. And I'll be back. Tomorrow's Friday. I'll be back tomorrow night at 10:15. So I hope that you guys will join me. And until next time, thank you so much. And thank you, Jacqueline.
Thank you for having me.
Oh,
thank you, everyone.
Pleasure. So we will say good night to you.
Yes, good night.
Bye. Let's see. We'll mute ourselves.